Alrighty, guys, welcome to the G5 podcast. I am Matthias Turner, joined with Stacey Lee Turner, and we've got I was going to say, Dr. Michael Breus, you were our first of many sleep doctors that we've had on, or sleep professionals, and I'd say that you're still our favorite.
All right.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
You've won our hearts
for a
over.
third time.
Exactly. Yeah. So third time podcaster, which is great. And I mean, it's very relative to everything that's going on right now. And that's why we kind of got you back on board. And we actually had a podcast a few weeks ago based on melatonin. We talked about it a little bit, but I think we'd like to pretty much focus this podcast around melatonin. And really what we'll go to eventually is what melatonin is doing for the coronavirus or COVID-19 right now as well. But that's kind of down the track. So I think,
and to be fair, that relationship is complicated.
Yes.
It's not a straightforward do this, that happens type of thing, but I'm happy to go into it with you for sure.
Yeah. And I think realistically what the overall talk will be about is optimal health, really. And that's what we're always fighting for our listeners. And I think that's really what you stand for as well. And so that's where melatonin kind of really comes into play. And I think really it'd just be talking about getting into it. So I guess let's maybe dive in to start with what is melatonin?
So melatonin's a hormone. Lots of people think it's an herb. They think it's some form of a supplement. It is a supplement, but it's actually a hormone. And so people need to be careful. I've written extensively about melatonin, and there's a lot of very interesting data on it. Now, some of the things I say may be a bit controversial compared to some of the other folks that you've had on board and people who are, super diehard melatonin people. But here are the basics. Right. So melatonin is a sleep regulator, not a sleep initiator. Okay. So lots of people historically think, oh, I take melatonin like I would take a sleeping pill. So I just take it right before bed, I turn off the light, and whammo, it's supposed to work. So nothing could be further from the truth. Okay. So all melatonin doesn't make you feel sleepy. Melatonin tells your brain it's bedtime, right? From a circadian clock perspective. Yeah. That's what melatonin does. And it does it really, really well. And it's the hormone of choice for doing that. Now, to be clear, there are other hormones that can have effects on circadian rhythmicity, but melatonin is really the main offender, I guess is the way you would say it. But melatonin is a hormone. And interestingly enough, it's not just produced, it's in the pituitary gland. Believe it or not, 95% of it, I think, is actually produced in the gut. Melatonin turns out to be an amazing antioxidant. And so some people are using it for its antioxidant properties. There's some pros and cons to doing that. We can discuss that as well. Also, melatonin, to be fair, is not dosed correctly, at least here in the United States. So when we look at the dosing recommendations, if you look at the data that comes out of MIT, what you'll discover is between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams turns out to be the appropriate dose for reaching plasma concentration levels in order to change circadian rhythmicity. That's the only thing that I actually use it for, generally speaking, is jet lag, social jet lag, those types of situations. Or if I have somebody who's a senior and their melatonin production has begun to decline, right? And so that happens often. I've got many patients who are above age 50, 55, into their 60s, and we discover, hey, melatonin production is starting to lag. They're starting to go earlier and earlier, wanting to go to bed at 9 o'clock and then 8:30 and then 8 o'clock. They're like, Michael, what the heck's going on here? Like, I want to stay up and watch, Seinfeld, for God's sakes, So sometimes we can move them a little bit with that. I personally am not a fan of using melatonin in children. There's a lot of different data out there. Some people are perfectly fine with it. I'm just going to be honest with you. I would not stick a hormone in a young, developing female body, period. End of story. I personally don't like it. Women are born with the eggs that they have. And when you introduce a hormone, we just don't know. I could be completely wrong. There could be absolutely no effects, but to be fair, I'm not willing to get on air and say, hey, everybody go out there and use melatonin, with your kids, because it's simply, it's not the case. It's not what I would recommend personally. Also being said, one interesting thing that we've discovered here in the United States, which I was referring to just a second ago, is that the dosages are incorrect on the bottles. Really interesting study came out, found out almost 75% of the melatonin on the label, when they brought it into the laboratory to see actually how much was in there, 75% of the time it was wrong.
Meaning that it was too much, too little. It was
too much, too little. Yeah. Maybe you're getting it, maybe you're not getting it. So people really need to kind of think through that. Also, you need to look at the sourcing for your melatonin. Because remember, it's a supplement. And so at least here in the United States, the ability to create a supplement, I can make it in my garage and I can sell it at the local health food store. And that would be perfectly legal thing to do here. So you want to look at purity standards of the companies that are creating your product. I mean, again, you're putting something into your body and it's a hormone, right? To be clear, 99% of the time it's a synthetic hormone. Well, not 99, actually, depending upon where you get your melatonin. There are now organic sources for melatonin. You can actually get melatonin from plants. There are certain plants that actually create it. And then there are certain ways that you can synthesize it in an organic fashion that can be very healthy and good for you. But the dosage, again, that you're wanting to look for is somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams if you're trying to move your circadian rhythm.
Yeah. So the common thought is that you have a higher melatonin production of a nighttime when you're getting ready for bed, and it's at its least in the morning. How do we test for melatonin in the body? Like if you were unsure as to, like you're saying, your older clients, how would you test for that?
So there are saliva tests, there are blood tests, but it all depends upon the timing of the test. Right. So that's the big thing that people forget, right? Because I'm a circadian guy. Like, I mean, I'm always thinking about timing. But a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can go to my doctor and get it tested. You can. By the way, people can order tests online. I mean, there are saliva and blood tests. Just make sure to record the time, and then you can have a comparison statistic. Part of the problem also is for melatonin testing in general. Many physicians who are testing, they don't really know and understand the test or the melatonin curve. So for me, when I'm testing, I'm looking at a melatonin curve. And so to be clear, I don't test somebody once. I'll probably test them 5 or 6 times throughout a 24-hour cycle. So that way I can plot and get a curve and really start to understand what's going on.
And is there big differences in the averages? Like you look at the averages on someone's testosterone levels, for instance, and it's massive scale as to what can be healthy. But realistically, what's it kind of look like in the melatonin scale?
Well, it's interesting because when you look at the references, unfortunately, many of the references are not male versus female, and they're not by age, which is exactly what we need. To be clear. So unfortunately, the ranges that we see are variable, and there's no real understanding as to why they're variable. So oftentimes what I'm doing is I might take melatonin readings, let's say 6 times in a 24-hour cycle, and then I might wait a month, and then I might do it again and get some corroborating data. To be clear, if you're doing this and you're female, you need to time it with your menstrual cycle, because menstruation absolutely positively affects melatonin. As well as sleepiness. I have some women who have a completely different bedtime the week before their period, and then a completely different bedtime the week after their period, because their energy levels are different and their need for sleep is different. So of course their melatonin is different.
Wow.
That makes sense, right? Because it's a hormone, so it's going to be affected by the hormonal state. So yeah,
exactly.
It makes complete sense when you think about it.
This is not rocket science, guys. Like, it's not like I'm some genius over here and thinking this through. It's just like, these are the basics of medicine and kind of how we should be thinking about it.
So I remember when we've spoken to you before and you said one of the things that you would love for everyone to do is to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. So how does that fit in then with the period causing changes in wanting to go to bed
Absolutely.
earlier?
So with women in particular, I have that caveat of that week surrounding. And what I usually do is I interview them, because some women have zero effect on their sleep. They're like, I'm not any more sleepy or less sleepy the week before, the week after. But there are some women, especially women who suffer from PPD, who have like really bad menstrual cramps and things of that nature, where we have to start to look at changing those bedtimes. But you're right. I am a consistent bedtime kind of person, but more so the wake up time than the bedtime these days. And I'll tell you why. The data on it is very, very consistent. Is if you wake up at the same time and you open your eyes and sunlight hits them, we were mentioning blue light before we went on, that blue light turns off that melatonin faucet. And that's what we want in the mornings. We just don't want that in the evenings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that, I think, as we go. Something that we really recommend for people is in that first 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half hour of waking is trying to get outside if they can.
100%. And it should be within 15 minutes of opening their eyes. They need direct sunlight and water. Those are the two big things: is room temperature water. They should grab a bottle and they should walk outside drinking it and be outside. Let their dogs out, let their kids play, whatever it is. To be fair, wear a robe. Okay. I learned this the hard way, right? Your neighbors do not want to see you in your boxer shorts. getting sunlight in the morning. Trust me.
Maybe they shouldn't be so nosy and looking over, hey?
Dude, I live in Los Angeles. I can literally lean out my window and touch my neighbor's house.
Yeah. Nice and close living. Excellent. So, I mean, we talked about some of the benefits in the body. So, I mean, it acts pretty much as a sleep regulator. It acts as antioxidant. Oh, sorry,
Right.
you want to touch on that?
Well, I was going to say one thing that people also need to understand is there are some cons associated with melatonin, right? So melatonin interacts with ACE inhibitors. Melatonin interacts with blood pressure medication. You need to be careful. If you're just saying, hey, I want to take melatonin because I think my circadian rhythmicity is off or I want to try to sleep better, especially if you have any type of a cardiac situation, call your doctor, talk with your doctor, make sure it's okay, because it can also interact with several of the medications, not just the cardiac situation in and of itself, which might be elevated blood pressure, but other cardiac medications. It may make them less effective. In some cases, it makes them more effective. So there's a dance that needs to be played there. Women who are pregnant should not be taking melatonin, right? Because you're going to influence the fetus. There's no reason to. So again, there are groups of people where melatonin is probably not going to be a good option, and they need to understand that as well.
And that's obviously the synthetic forms that you're talking about, all of these cons, and when we were talking about it before, and the dosages, obviously. But how do you then improve your own melatonin production?
Personal melatonin?
Yes, you were saying it is obviously a hormone that's released from the pituitary gland in the gut, and how do we improve that?
So it turns out regular, consistent sleep is arguably the best way to improve melatonin function and process. So it's really about consistency. And you see, you led me to this already because you already said you like consistent sleep, Michael. Tell us more about it. That's what does it, really. And it's really the consistent wake-up time. And I mean, I know it sucks. Look, I get it. If you wake up at 5:30 during the week and you don't want to wake up at 5:30 on the weekends, I totally understand. Shut up and do it anyway, because it's going to help, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to actually help consolidate your sleep. It's going to jack the quality of your sleep. I've got patients now where when I've got them on a super consistent schedule, they don't need as much sleep. Like they used to think they needed 8 hours. I've got these people on 6.5 hours and they're waking up naturally without an alarm. They go to bed, they fall asleep in 10 minutes. They wake up 6.5 hours later and they feel like $1,000,000. Like, guys, this isn't hard. It's literally about consistency. And a lot of that has to do with melatonin really kicking off at a particular time and you knowing what your chronotype is to know when that time is to sleep at the appropriate time. That's really the secondary key feature, is knowing and understanding your chronotype. Now, you guys have had me on before talking about my book, The Power of When, and those chronotypes. And so you apply those chronotypes and you start to understand melatonin.
Yeah. So talking about someone like a bear who would maybe like to nap on a weekend, then you would say, hey, wake up
every day,
a regular time, and then have your nap just to catch up on that sleep if you feel you need it.
Now, I would say that, but I'm gonna put a caveat on there, and that's currently during some of the craziness that's going on right now, which is COVID-19, napping is probably not going to be a great strategy for you, and I'll explain to you why. So what's happening is a lot of people are staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning, binge watching TV, and then they're like, oh crap, I got to have work tomorrow, if you have work. And what ends up happening is you don't have to shower, you don't have to drive, and so you turn off your Zoom screen, right? And you're sitting there in your bunny slippers and your pajamas, right?
With your business shirt at the top.
Right, because you've slept so much up until that time, and you've changed your schedule, right? And so what's great about being quarantined is you can actually sleep based on your chronotype, right? Think about it. So all of a sudden, you can have a very unique and interesting opportunity. So instead of staying up late at 4 o'clock in the morning and watching whatever it is you want to watch, know and understand what your chronotype is. If you go to chronoquiz.com or thepowerofwhenquiz.com, and we've talked about these before on your show, you get your chronotype.
Recommend them all the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
That's where you go. And once you can sleep based on your chronotype, dude, everything gets better.
Yeah, definitely.
That's super interesting. Very, very interesting. And I mean, you actually said that you've been busier than ever because of COVID-19, pretty much. Like, so many people are stressing and not sleeping well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, is that the main thing that people are reaching out to you for because of
Well,
this?
it's interesting. So I've gotten 3 different types of requests these days. So one is, Michael, what are some sleep tips that we can do to help our sleep in order to prevent contracting or to at least keep our immune systems functioning high? So I've got some great information for your listeners about that. I've got some people who say, holy crap, I'm so anxious. I'm having scary dreams now. What do I do about that? That's been a big topic. And then the third one, quite frankly, has been people who have actually contracted COVID, and they're like, what do I do now from a sleep perspective? Because the recommendations actually change if you contract the virus. So you want to do all three, or which one do you want to do?
Yeah, let's
I feel
go
like we
for
should
it.
dive in.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do all three. So first of all, when you're looking at COVID itself and trying to understand the tips, and by the way, I'm going to give everybody a link, and if you guys don't mind publishing it in the show notes, you can get all this information by going to this link, and it'll have it all listed there for you. It's just www.thesleepdoctor.com/sleep-pandemic. And they'll be able to see all, it's a landing page. It's got all kinds of good resources for people. They'll dig it for sure. But when you start to think through like, okay, what are some of the things that I should be doing, like right now, there's a couple things that I want to identify for people. So number one, the 90 minutes before bed, give yourself a media diet. Okay. Nobody needs to know COVID statistics right before bed. Okay. Because all it does is stress you out. Right. Do yourself a favor. There's actually data to suggest that if you do something that causes optimism or happiness before bed, you fall asleep more quickly and you have more pleasant dreams. Interesting. So one of my big recommendations right now is a gratitude list. So, and you can write it down, you can have it in your head, whatever it is that gets you there, but really thinking about the positive things that are going on. I get it. There are negative things that are happening. I get it. People are scared and unsure of what's going to happen next. However, that's not a valuable time for you to be thinking about that. And it's certainly not a productive time for you to be thinking about
I'm going to interject really quickly. We've got a 30-day gratitude challenge, so you guys can jump on that. It's completely free. Yeah, just go to thechieflife.com, click on the link on the drop-down menu, and you'll find it, 30-day gratitude challenge. And it's just posting your 3 things you're most grateful for every day. And we've got a group that's running that people are posting it every day. It's super cool just to see everyone posting their happy thoughts for the day. So cool.
And most people are doing it in the morning because ideally, they're not doing it screens before bed. But, so they might then just handwrite it or think of them again at night, as you're saying.
Yeah, and you could even send out the information to them and say, hey, think about this at night and then tell us in the morning type of thing, because what we'll see is it'll hopefully positively affect their sleep. So that's certainly something that I talk about. So the media, if you will, the media diet, 90 minutes before bed. Also, what's interesting is that 90-minute period of time, number one, that's when you would actually take melatonin. So if you are a melatonin user, you want to take it approximately 90 minutes before bed if it's in tablet form. If it's a tincture and in a liquid form, you only need about 30 minutes because it'll absorb it in a different way, and it'll probably make it up there faster. The other thing you can do, by the way, at that 90 minutes is take a hot bath. There's a ton of data to show that if you raise core body temperature, the subsequent fall in the core body temperature makes people feel sleepy, and that can actually help people falling asleep. And by the way, it feels really good to take a nice hot bath before bed, right? And guess what? Throw your bed partner in there too. I mean, again, there's nothing like this is the time for self-care. This is the time to be aware of how your environment and how your actions are going to affect what's going on with you. So absolutely, positively use that time, well. A couple of other considerations. As I said before, keep your schedule consistent, specifically your wake up time. If you wake up at 6:30 during the week, I know it stinks. Wake up at 6:30 on the weekends.
Whilst you're talking about the wake up time, what happens if somebody else in the house wakes you up before your wake up time?
Right.
Should you try to go back to sleep, or is that like it's time to get up now?
It's not me, it's the dog.
Does the person who's asleep own a firearm? I'm just asking. So this is a very common issue. I've heard it a zillion times, but primarily it happens with people who are snoring. And so if you have somebody in your life or an animal that wakes you up on a fairly frequent basis, a couple of options that you have are, earplugs, sound machines, things of that nature. And if you do have somebody that's next to you that's snoring and you're fearful that they stop breathing in their sleep, getting them checked for sleep apnea is going to be something that's going to be very important to do. And a lot of people are now noticing things about their bed partners that they never noticed before because they're spending so much time together. So again, that snoring that's always been there, if all of a sudden you're noticing gasps or chokes for air, or it stops for brief periods of time and starts back up, you may actually be doing your bed partner a favor by identifying what's going on.
Yeah, totally. 2
other quick things, and then we'll move on to the second topic. Now is not the time to crack open the wine cellar and drink all the wine in the wine cellar, right? There's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out, right? And so it's so funny, but people are starting to drink wine now at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And they're like, I'm done with the kids, let's go all grab a glass of wine. To be clear, I have no problems with people drinking, but you got to be smart about it, right? So alcohol definitely affects your sleep. While it may make you feel sleepy, it keeps you out of the deeper stages of sleep. And it's a diuretic, so you become dehydrated because you start to pee, and then you're peeing right before you go to bed. Many people also don't know this, but sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. So you actually lose through the humidity in your breath, you lose almost a full liter of water every night. So think about it like this. You drink a couple glasses of wine, you pee them out. Now you have this sleep event. And then what do most people do? They grab a cup of coffee, which is also a diuretic. And so what happens is we get stuck on this hamster wheel of dehydration. And there's a million different studies to show why this isn't good for your overall body, but there's quite a few to talk about sleep. So be careful with the alcohol. So my general recommendation is 1 drink, wait 1 hour, have 1 glass of water. 2 drinks, wait 2 hours, 2 glasses of water. 3 drinks, the same. And if you're drinking more than 3 drinks, you probably got an issue going on.
Well, it also starts to create more of a stress response in the body then. So it's becoming, although it might feel nice on the brain, it's definitely becoming a negative effect on what's actually happening in the body as well. So I think for women, it's anything over 2 drinks can do that. And for most men, even 2+ would do that as well. So yeah,
I completely agree with that. And the data is very consistent with that as well. It goes from a relaxing to more of a myopic and in some cases aggressive standpoint, especially for guys. And then the last one, this is one that nobody seems to think about, but I think is important to mention, is keeping your environment clean. Like we're spending a ton of time at home right now. And so we're bringing in dust and particulates and if we got the animals in the house, that kind of stuff. So make sure you're washing your sheets in super hot water, a minimum of once a week, in some cases twice a week. Again, make sure you're using HEPA filters on your air filters. And if you've got a humidifier, you probably want to use it. One of the easiest things that I've had most people do is once a day, walk around your house and open up every window, and then walk around your house and close every window just to get some fresh air in there. Trust me, the whole house feels better for it.
The other thing I'd add to that is because it's your environment, is making sounds nice, like putting on some music you enjoy and putting on some smells that you enjoy, like things like that are really nice for creating a great environment. Yeah,
I completely agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You ready to move on to topic number 2?
Totally, let's do it.
So topic number 2 has to do with a lot of these crazy dreams that people are having. And we're kind of dovetailing a little bit with melatonin here because when people overdose on melatonin, they get super vivid dreams and in some cases nightmares. And that's one of the earliest signs of melatonin overdose. So number 1, if you're taking a lot of melatonin right now, which would be anything over probably 1.5 to 2 milligrams as an adult, then you're getting very vivid dreams, this may be the reason why. You definitely want to scale that back. So that way you're not having that side effect. But the scary dreams make sense to me for a couple of different reasons. Right after 9/11, my practice spiked. I had more people who were freaking out after that. And trust me, I get it. I completely understand where people are coming from, but the anxiety is palpable. I think people are concerned because while they may not be concerned necessarily for their safety or their health, they're concerned about their career. They might be concerned about family members who might be in situations where they can't control occupancy and things like that. There's a lot of reasons to be stressed out right now. Now, granted, doing the little data diet and the gratitude list are going to be helpful before bed. And I still recommend those along with the hot bath because it can be quite relaxing. But some things to really think about is distraction, right? And so there's nothing wrong with a little distraction. I'm literally the only sleep doctor in the universe that says it's okay to sleep with the television on. Right? Now, I get it. You should be wearing your blue light blocking glasses. I completely agree. But at the end of the day, if that's what helps chill you out, just do me a favor. Don't watch the news, right? I mean, you certainly don't need that information. Watch an old episode of something funny, if that's your thing. Or, dude, you don't have to watch TV. I've got some people, they're breaking out old photo albums and looking at their kids when they were younger and having all those fun, pleasant memories before bed. And guess what? They're sleeping better and they're dreaming better and it's working. So, setting yourself up in the right way to do it is not a bad idea. For some people, I live in Los Angeles, cannabis is legal. Cannabis is an option for a lot of people, especially for turning off some of those thoughts. Now, to be fair, there are some people when they use cannabis, they actually get crazy dreams. So if you're one of those people that does that, you need to be careful about the potency, perhaps, of your cannabis, because that can also be having an effect.
Is that
Also,
the same for CBD oils? Sorry to interrupt.
not. So
It's not, no.
THC is more of the psychoactive,
It's the
more
one,
powerful.
yeah,
Like CBD, generally speaking, has almost no psychoactivity. So I'm not as worried about people using CBD during this time. In fact, CBD can be quite helpful, more so for inflammation and pain, quite frankly, than for sleep. The data that I've been reading on sleep says you need almost 200 milligrams of CBD ingested before you really start to see a major sleep effect. And to be fair, CBD isn't the answer, it's CBN.
Okay.
So if you look at the constituents within the cannabis plant, CBN, which is actually oxidized THC, turns out to have a major effect on sleep, and it's much more powerful, and you need less of it. So for folks out there who are looking and going to dispensaries, talk with your dispensary about any products that have CBN in them, because they're more likely to have a somnolent effect. Other things that you can do if you've got a lot of crazy dreams going on is talk to somebody. If you have a therapist, if you have mental health issues, depression, anxiety, so on and so forth, during a time of quarantine is not a time to stop going to therapy. Here's the good news. 99% of therapists can do what they do online. So talk with your therapist and explain what's kind of going on for you. To be clear, people are dreaming about what's concerning them and what they're thinking about. So by changing the things that you're concerned with and by changing the things that you're thinking about, you have a far greater likelihood to quell many of these kind of scary dreams. Also, there's a technique, believe it or not. It was developed by a guy named Dr. Barry Krakow at the University of New Mexico, where you actually write out your entire dream. And what you do is at the end of it, you change it so that you're no longer the victim, you're the victor, right? So if you're having a dream that COVID is trying to get you, then write it all out, then change the ending to the point where you say, now you're able to find, the vaccine for COVID, let's say in this particular example. Then what you do is you read your prose 4 or 5 times before going to bed. So you read it with the changed ending. And over the course of 7 to 10 days, it actually changes inside the dream.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It's
powerful.
super cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then finally, we talk about, what do you do if you actually get COVID? And so, what do we do there? So historically, you heard me say, stay on your schedule, sleep your amount of time. If you get COVID, all bets are off. You need to sleep, right? Remember, sleep is healing, right? That's what we do when we sleep. So your body's going to need extra sleep. And also, by the way, if you feel like you're getting COVID, it's going to be good for you to go ahead and get some extra rest, right? So if you're starting to feel achy, if you're starting to get headaches, if you think you're starting to have a fever, these are all situations where, number one, it's important to consider that you could have COVID, and number two, just increase your total sleep time by a couple hours. This will be helpful. These are general recommendations that I've given for the flu historically, but to be fair, COVID is pretty close to a flu. Also, remember to stay cool. Remember, it's easier to sleep in the cool. And so, sleeping, for example, without socks, with your feet exposed. And I'm telling many people it actually makes a lot more sense to sleep naked these days, because of your body's ability to thermoregulate is not hampered by you having clothes like, if you have flannel pajamas on and a down comforter and all this other stuff, it's not going to be easy. And then, of course, changing your linens is something else that I'm recommending. And then in cases where you are sick, the environment, the cleanliness of the environment turns out to be a massive factor. So if you are sick and you've got somebody who's hopefully helping you and taking care of you, don't leave the tissues, hanging out on the nightstand type of thing. Like, you need to get all that stuff out every single night. You need to have a clearing. You need to clean it off. You need to kind of sterilize the area and make sure that it's okay for you. And then also, I'm telling people to use a bed wedge. So it's just a little piece of foam. It looks like a triangle, but what it does is it actually elevates your whole torso, starting at your lower back, and actually lifts your whole body. And the reason that becomes important is because it helps with congestion, postnasal drip, and things like that. And then finally, be careful. Do not take over-the-counter sleep medication when you've got COVID. So there's a lot of, there's the PM medications, if you know what I'm talking about. Those are the ones that really are not the things that you want to be taking during this, because they all contain Benadryl, which is an antihistamine, and it's just going to make you fuzzy, and it might interact with some of the medications that could actually be helping fight the infection. So your body knows exactly what it should be doing during that period of time. It's probably sleeping. So just, let it do that.
So interesting. That's really cool. There's a lot of really good tips there. Thank you.
You bet. And all this information is available for folks at this website, which is thesleepdoctor.com/sleep-pandemic.
That's perfect. And so talking about melatonin a little bit deeper, synthetic versus natural form. Yep. When you're having synthetic variations, does it respond the same?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it depends. So here's the thing, is natural is always better than synthetic. I mean, that's just a fact. Just in terms of absorption rates and your body's ability to accept it. I personally, when I use melatonin, there's one particular company, I don't get any money from them or anything like that. They're called Herbatonin. I'll get you guys the link for it so we can put it in the show notes as well. It's actually made from seagrass. And it's really good stuff. It's 100% organic. These guys have really gone the distance with it. I know the owners of the company because once I saw it, I was like, dude, tell me what you got. And I kind of dug into their science. But yeah, I would agree with you that non-synthetic or natural forms of melatonin are going to be great. And seagrass isn't the only one. I mean, there's actually a decent amount of data looking at tart cherry juice having melatonin in it. But to be fair, you have to drink the tart cherry juice in the morning and you have to drink it in the evening for it to be effective. And that's a lot of tart cherry juice.
Yeah, a lot of carb load on the body too, potentially.
Right, exactly. Lots of sugar.
Yeah, exactly. And so diving into, I guess, COVID versus melatonin a little bit more and some of the science that's coming out now, because melatonin is an antioxidant in the body and the one that works 100% compared to any other antioxidant in the body. Yeah. What are they showing that melatonin is fighting against COVID?
Okay, so it's complicated. And so I can give you a super detail. So I've got some information that I'll send you guys that you can post if you'd like. But here's kind of the bottom line for it is melatonin is both anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, which is great. But melatonin's capacity to actually hold inflammation in check and to, believe it or not, restrain immune activity is the reason why we're looking at it now. And you might be thinking, wait a second, did you say restrain activity and hold inflammation in check? What's going on? So what we've discovered is that melatonin can affect something called a cytokine. These are anti-inflammatory cytokines, which are a body's natural response. And melatonin has actually been shown to reduce these pro-inflammatory cytokines. Michael, why would we want to do that? We want inflammation to get to those spots to help fight the disease, right? Here's what happens with COVID is we get an overreaction. So our body actually, when COVID hits, it overreacts and we get what's called a cytokine storm. What melatonin seems to be able to do is balance this cytokine response, which is very interesting. Now, to be fair, the only data that I've been able to find is in animal models. So I don't have human data surrounding melatonin and COVID yet. I'm telling you that it's going to come out relatively soon. But what we now see, again, in the animal models is that the underlying pneumonia and lung damage that are, signatures of COVID is actually an exaggerated inflammatory response to the body's own immune system. And melatonin, at least in animals, has been shown to help that. Specifically, there's a cytokine called NLRP3. Let me repeat that, NLRP3. And there's been one Italian journal that actually did have a human study in it, but I'm not convinced about it just yet. So again, things to think about, but melatonin appears like it may actually have a real possibility for us. And there's also an interesting theory going around about melatonin, which is that the reason that children are not getting COVID is because they're naturally super high in melatonin, which is kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love that. That's really cool. I think we might wrap it there just based on the fact that your time is running out. So I'd like to say a massive thank you for joining us. For anyone who wants to check out any of Dr. Breus's stuff, it is thesleepdoctor.com. Once again, for the pandemic stuff in particular, it's thesleepdoctor.com/sleep-pandemic. And I'll put that all in the show notes, as well as linking to the previous episodes we've done, which dives a little bit deeper into sleep cycles, your chronotypes. It dives a lot into boosting your melatonin and everything before bed as well. Sleep hygiene, sleep routine, everything like that. So, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for all those knowledge bombs.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. I love doing your podcast. You guys are awesome. I love your enthusiasm and I love your respect for sleep and having me on. So it's been my honor and pleasure to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much.